creepiest and weirdest experiences at somebody else's house. Story 1. Not only the weirdest, but also not my proudest. Good friend of mine and I were just partying a lot and making bad decisions, drinking a lot. Being very carefree about what we did and who we spent time with. A lot of things I don't care to get into. We drove 3 hours away to partake in our bad decisions. Friend blacks out in the car. I am struggling to get him to wake up. I was really worried about him at that point. He just wasn't breathing very much and was responding to being punched or slapped or anything. Eventually, he does wake up, kind of confused. I notice he has a headlight out in the dark and he's not a good driver. And I don't technically have a license. The risk seemed to really outweigh the rewards of getting back home and crashing at his place. So we agreed that we should probably get to the nearest hotel and book a room and go home in the morning after being sobered up. We get to a gas station not even a mile away, just a light goes on. Grab some Gatorade or something and start looking up hotels. This older woman we've never met walks up to our car and asks if we have a lighter. She's obviously been crying. We give her a lighter and ask if she's a local and if she knows where the closest hotel is, 'cause we need a crash. She tells us she for sure could show us a hotel not far away, 'cause her man just got mad at her and freaked out and went to this hotel for the night. We agreed. Then she suggests that we should save our money and we could crash at her place right behind the gas station. Our inhibitions are pretty low, and my friend looks at me and says I'm not opposed to it. And at that point, I only had $30 to my name, which wouldn't get us shit, and she seemed safe. So I figured, all right, we were gonna check it out. She was a sweet lady. I would never in a million years do that ever again. We get to her house and she's got the bed on the floor in the living room and keeps a cane or something against the door, as that part of town is super dangerous, and scares her without her boyfriend being there. She offers up the bed and takes the couch. She is really cool and pretty harmless, but definitely a heavy drinker. We were too, so whatever. She gets drunk. We get pretty effed up ourselves. She has a guitar that I played, and she actually gave it to me. She recorded me singing and even put it on her Facebook. We taught her how to add us, how to use her cell phone, because she didn't know how to use Messenger, and she had a lot of messages she never checked. One in particular from her high school sweetheart. So they started talking, and she was grateful for that. Not long into the night, she's on the couch trying to seduce us. Well, we told her we were not really interested in all of that. Way too effed up anyway for our plumbing to even work low. We weren't offended at all. We really did not have the capacity to care or be creeped out, and we didn't want her to feel embarrassed. She ended up saying something like, "If I touch myself, don't y'all say shit." And then she just passed out immediately and did not do anything well. We left, agreed that it was a strange night, but our adventures to this city were not over for a while. Every other weekend for probably 3 months after, until my friend finally had the strength to treat his alcoholism in rehab, which inevitably led me to rethinking my life decisions too. She wasn't too handy with her phone, but we did go to visit her again every time that we went to that city, and stayed the night a few more times. Nothing weird ever happened again. She was lonely and always so thrilled to see us, and we would take her for car rides. She did not have a car, and listened to music. She eventually called us after we both cleaned up our acts and started trying to focus on work and not party, asking why she hadn't seen us in a couple months. Said she'd went to a homeless shelter briefly, but inevitably ended up with that guy that she reconnected with, and he had a nice place and they were doing well, and that we should come see her nice new place and stay. We really were not in a position to go back. That was the last I ever heard from her. She never messaged back much on Facebook to begin with, but I have tried to reach out a few times and not gotten an answer. I just hope that she's alive and well. Very weird experience, but I think fondly of her. It sounds like you had quite the adventure and a very strange night with that sweet but lonely woman. It's understandable that at the time you both didn't have the capacity to be creeped out or offended by her actions. I'm glad you guys got the care you needed though, and hopefully she is safe and happy wherever she may be now. It's a strange and interesting story, and it's good that you are able to look back on it fondly, but it's especially good that nothing else bad happened. I really did not see the direction that story was going in. Story 2. I was with my teenage and childhood best friend at her fiance's family's home for the week. I was 18 at the time. My friend, 19. Her fiance, 25. His parents, 50s. His younger brother, 19. His sister, 30s. And the sister's son, 9. The first night I was there, I was using the bathroom. Just as I was standing up, I heard a strange noise coming from a cabinet in there, and saw the 9-year-old boy with a cabinet door cracked open, watching me use the bathroom. He had this creepy smile on his face. I was shocked for a moment and told him to get out. He did, not saying a word, just watching me with that same weird grin. Over the next 2 days, he repeatedly found ways to catch me when I was undisposed, showering, changing in the bathroom, anything along those lines. He did anything from peeking under doors to hiding in closet to putting things indoors. So they didn't fully lock to stealing a compact mirror from his mom and slipping it under my freaking door. I had to start checking for him hiding in any room I was in. And if I had to use a bathroom in the house that didn't lock, had my friend stand guard. I immediately told my friend and her fiance after the first incident. When the boy did it again, her fiance was pissed on my behalf and talked to his parents and her sister about it. But they didn't seem surprised or bothered by that information. They just shrugged it off like it was a perfectly normal thing and said they would try to keep an eye on him. They did not. The last straw was on the second night I found him in my room next to my bed, watching me sleep. And I knew fully well that I had locked my door. He never said a word, just watched me with that same effing grin that honestly spooked me. I ended up sleeping on the floor in my friend and her fiance's room that night. My friend told me that she found out the pervy little kid, or pervert as we started calling him, had a track record of this with certain women. Apart from my friend, her fiance, and his younger brother, everyone else in the house just acted like it was normal. I ended up finding somewhere else to stay for night 3, then leaving the trip early. I couldn't take it. Couldn't take being around him with that stare. Having to constantly be on guard and my privacy invaded. That little kid still creeps me out when the memory comes to mind. Oh my gosh, that is an extremely disturbing experience, and I am so sorry you had to go through that. It is unacceptable for anyone to invade your privacy in such a way, and being a child doesn't excuse it. It's good that you spoke up to your friend and her fiance, and they took action to address the situation. But it does suck that the parents and family didn't care. It seems like they know this is a problem, and I hope they come to terms to realize they have to fix it, especially before he gets older and there can be real consequences. Story 3. When I was 6 or 7, I went over to my friend's house one afternoon after school to try out their new PlayStation. They had just come out around then, and we were not very well off, so it was a big deal. His older brother comes in, 16 or 17, takes the controller from me and sits down in front of me blocking the TV. Not unusual. He was a prick. My friend starts to yell at him, older brother's laughing. Then his eyes roll back into his head, and he falls back into my lap, convulsing and foaming at the mouth, having a seizure. I froze. I could not do anything. I just stared down at his face in my lap, watching him die, or so I thought. His mom runs in screaming and ushers us out while she calls 911. Obviously, I went home. My mom would not let me go see my friend after that. I just waited to make sure he was okay. A couple weeks later, they moved back to Cali. I did get to say goodbye to my friend, but I never saw him again. Found out later from my mom, his brother had actually OD'd. Flash forward 20 years, and I'm in therapy and an addict. I had completely forgotten about it. We were talking about my triggers, and I brought up how, for some reason, every time I play video games, I want to use them. It all came flooding back to me. Every detail of that day. His face, the room, the way the sun hit all of us. What I had for lunch that came up shortly after. Even the game that we were playing. Crash Bandicoot, which I hated with irrational, seething passion after that. That horrifying experience actually saved my life. I never wanted my family to find me like that, or hear my mom scream like that, or see the look my friend gave him and me from my own little brothers. I'm 6 years sober this year with a fiance. How's the way? Miss you, Nick. Hope the prick made it. Story 4. I was harassed by a tortoise while on the toilet. In college, my friend and I wanted to go for a festival that happened to be just a few blocks away from my friend's parents' house. So they invited us to stay the night. My friend was into reptiles big time, and it turns out so were their parents. Almost every room in their house, except the kitchen, had a reptile enclosure in it. I had to use the restroom after the drive from campus, so they told me I could use the one on the first floor. It was an older house, and for whatever reason, the bathroom was huge. I set up shop only to notice one wall was completely taken up by a massive enclosure for their boa constrictor, and a bright blue kiddie pool sat at the far end of the bathroom. I was peeking in the constrictor enclosure trying to spot her when the kiddie pool began to move towards me with a repeated thump, thump, thump. I was mid-deposit, staring at this encroaching pool with increasing concern. as it kept getting closer and closer. With a final thump, the pool was close enough I could see over the lip. Inside was a little grumpy tortoise. I watched it lean back a little, tuck its head in, then bash the side of the pool with its shell, scooting the whole thing forward an inch or so. He kept moving the pool until it was up against my foot. Then the tortoise just repeatedly bashed the side of the pool in rapid succession. When I got up to wash my hands, the tortoise changed directions to thump after me to the sink. When I got out and told my friend, they said, "Oh yeah, that's Ted. My parents haven't given him his salad in some time yet and he's cranky." We then took Ted out in the yard, fed him some leafy greens and fruit, and had a great afternoon. Well, that's quite a story. I have to admit I've never heard of a tortoise harassing someone on the toilet before. Talk about a unique bathroom experience. Was this some kind of reptilian invasion? I guess you could say he was a real shell raiser. And it's good to hear that you and your friend were able to give Ted the snack he desperately needed. I know sometimes I get pretty hangry too. Story 5. Oh no, you just woke up with a very effed up memory. When I was in high school, we got a new student, a girl who got transferred because of unruly behavior. I was an outcast. She was an outcast. So we befriended each other, although our social status was the only thing we had in common. I realized very quickly that she was a pathological liar. From the very first day, she'd been telling other students that she had missed her period. After a month of crying wolf, we started ignoring her false pregnancy drama. I'm picking this example as it's relevant to the story, but there were a myriad of other instances where we caught her in a lie. One day, she claimed she was doing coke with the elite every weekend. The next day, she had never even tried weed. It's a bit challenging to develop a friendship with someone who you cannot trust at all, not even when they're telling you about oatmeal they had for breakfast. So after half a semester of pregnancy scares, she actually got pregnant. Her boyfriend was an alleged abuser. She weaved too many stories about him. He was sterile, so he beat her up because the baby was not his. They were breaking up twice a week. There were 2 other possible baby daddies, and one of them was twice her age. It was a headache listening to all of this. One day, my friend and her boyfriend invited me over for dinner. She was very pregnant, and it turned out the kid was his. Whatever. We were eating and talking about random things when the boyfriend nonchalantly said he was gonna F the baby after it's born. My friend took it pretty lightly and made a joke out of it. I was in complete shock and wanted to disappear. We stopped being friends shortly after high school. Story 6. When I was 23-ish, I decided to reconnect with an old friend from middle school. He had gotten married, had a 1-year-old kid, and lived not too far from me. So he invited me over one night to catch up and have a beer. I got over to his place and there were a few other people there I didn't know. 2 guys who were his friends and some girl who was a friend of his wife. Everything is going fine for a while, until everyone starts randomly doing Molly on a Wednesday night, except for me and my friend's wife, while the baby is just right there, chilling in the playpen. A while later, the girl, wife's friend, starts freaking out. She's making no sense and threatening to stab my friend and the baby, yelling at the top of her lungs. I don't know if this was PTSD, a psychotic break, or what, but it was effing scary. My friend eventually managed to physically push out the front door and yells, "Get the F out of our house!" Not even 10 seconds later, and the glass window next to the front door shatters, and I see her bloody leg blasting through it. The girl is kicking, punching, and screaming while broken glass is flying everywhere. This is when my friend's wife grabs the baby, calls the cop, and heads out the back door. The cops eventually get there, put her in handcuffs, and she goes to jail. Hell of a reunion, and was probably the last time I saw that middle school friend. Well, catching up with old friends can be fun, but who knew it would turn into a full-blown episode of Cops? And on a school night, no less. I hope your friend can look back on and laugh about that someday. But yeah, I think it's best that maybe you avoid them for a little bit. Story 7. At 12 years old, we shifted to a small town from our cattle property so we kids could go to high school. I didn't know anyone at school till the weird kid befriended me, invited me home after school one day. There's me thinking great and making friends. When we got there, her mom was obviously slightly drunk. No father around that I could see. Just sitting in her room talking crap when her mom calls us into her bedroom. So we went in and her mom is lying on a single bed. And there's a double in there that we both sort of lounge on. Then her mom starts crying. The girl tells me her dad died about 6 months ago. I'm so sorry to hear that. Her mom starts telling me how he was a bad alcoholic and had gone to bed one night. He was spooning her when he died in his sleep with his arms wrapped around the mom. Because she was drunk too, she didn't wake up till quite late. And his body had started to be us. She realizes and starts screaming. Daughter runs in, dad is dead, and mom is stuck in his arms. Apparently, I had to call the police to help. She could not get out. Best bit though was I was sitting on the bed where he died 6 months previous. But they never changed the sheets or covers. They smelled musty. No wonder the girl acted weird. They both really needed therapy, but this was nearly 50 years ago. Story 8. This isn't the worst, and it's not my weirdest, but I was hitchhiking in upstate New York when I was in my early 20s. Some nice people offered to take me home and give me a ride to Syracuse in the morning. When I got to the house, the first thing anyone said to me was, it's been a while since you've been able to shave. Same dude tried explaining to me that I was hitchhiking because I was sad, and that I was sad because I hadn't had enough sex. I played dumb and let him talk in circles. There were 10 to 15 adults and children living there and 2 different dogs, and they had just had litters. I took a shower and was scooping puppies out of the tub the whole time. When it was time to pass out, someone took me upstairs to sleep in a spare room. While we were walking up the stairs, he handed a bottle of Febreze over his shoulder and said, "You're gonna want this. There's some kind of dead animal trapped in the wall, and we haven't been able to find it, but we can smell it. One of the cats is missing." So the highlight of the whole fiasco was a Home Depot shopping cart in the kitchen that was overflowing with Mountain Dew cans with a chainsaw blade sticking in the middle of it. They told me to come back and work apple harvest with them, and I never did. 10 out of 10, would go back though. That's definitely a unique experience. It's always interesting meeting new people while hitchhiking, but it sounds like this particular household was quite the interesting bunch. The puppies in the shower sound cute, but the dead animal smell and missing cat, not so much. And who knew that all my problems could be solved with just a little bit more naughty time? Who knew? Story 9. When I was about 10, my cousins and I were sleeping at my grandma's house in Oklahoma. My Uncle Rick came home drunk and got loud, so my grandma started yelling at him and hitting him with a rolled-up magazine. My other Uncle Cecil, who's only 4 years older than us, told us 3 kids to run out the back door and hide at the creek because Rick was a mean drunk. It's about midnight and we run down to the creek and stand around looking at each other for about 10 minutes and then we walk back. We come in through the front door with muddy feet and leaves in our hair. Uncle Rick had already gone to bed. He was not mean at all. My grandma yells at us asking why we were outside. We say we were hiding at the creek. She says, "Who told you to hide at the creek?" We all pointed at Uncle Cecil, who was in the corner laughing. She starts chasing him around the table and beating him with a magazine. He was hiding his face, yelling, "Ow, ow, ow," like he was in pain. But I could see he was still laughing. We all ran to the bedroom and jumped in bed and pulled the covers over our head until it got quiet, and we went to sleep. Story 10. A buddy and I were walking down the street and noticed a drunk guy bothering a woman outside a store and his balls were hanging out of his shorts. We stopped to help, and so does some guy in an army jacket. And after the cops come by to deal with the drunk guy, the army guy invites us over to have a beer. We were about 14 or so at the time. We said sure, get to his apartment, and he gives us a beer each and shows us his big knife, tells us how to gouge out eyes and how to shoot someone under the chin at the throat pointing up. So if by chance they survive, they'll be paralyzed. Then proceeds to demonstrate to me a choke move he was taught, which effing hurt. My friend had the knife in hand just in case the army guy did not let go. After I was let go and able to breathe, we pieced out of there fast. The longer we sat there, the more scared I became. I've not thought about that for some time. Story 11. This one time, I was at my ex-girlfriend during that time, and we weren't doing very well in the relationship. We were in the driveway talking, and we ended up sitting in her car while we talked about how the relationship wasn't the same as before, and how we really weren't feeling like it was going anywhere. The regular talk before a breakup. It was pretty tense and kind of sad. We noticed that the bathroom window was on, so we lowered our voices as we didn't want her family to hear us talking about breaking up. She was about to cry when we heard a mass-compressed fart echo through the confines of the porcelain toilet. The atmosphere changed entirely. We tried not to laugh, but it was impossible not to. Her mom called her without asking her name. We rushed the hell out of the car and proceeded to laugh our asses off. That day, whatever her mom did before laying the log saved our relationship. We did not break up until a few months later. I can just imagine the relief and amusement that must have come over you both. And the fact that her mom unknowingly saved your relationship with her bodily functions is just hilarious. It's moments like these that make life interesting and unpredictable. I think it's a good idea that maybe if my boyfriend wants to break up, I'll I'll just play a fart noise on my phone, and who knows, maybe we'll get a few more months just like you guys. Story 12. Went to a friend's early Saturday in middle school, possibly 9th grade, and went grocery shopping with her sister, and mom. While we got back and I had a bunch of bags of groceries waiting in the garage by the door, my friend said to just go in. I didn't want it because her dad was home and I hadn't met him yet. My friend insisted it was fine. I went in from the garage door, and when I looked in directly to the right in the kitchen, her dad was cooking something on the stove, and only his tidy whities. I do not remember which explicitive he yelled, but I immediately went back out the way I came. I can only imagine the face I was making. Somehow my friend convinced me to still stay the night. I was deeply embarrassed and avoided her father. Lol, I felt like such a bad guest. I always knocked, and I was mostly mad at her for telling me to go in. Hilarious now, though. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.